My time. Thank you.
I now recognize Mr. Cloud from Texas for 5 minutes of question.
Thank you all for being here today. Thank you, Chair, for continuing this investigation. So important to where we need to go in the future. You know, Director Ratcliffe, I promoted you maybe in one way, but you mentioned some of the stuff coming up with that China did to cover up a lot of what happened. We know they hoarded PPP, they silenced dissenters, they blocked investigations into the Wuhan lab. They've, as you mentioned, blamed service members. They've destroyed data, and so where we don't have maybe evidence of the definitive evidence of the origin, it certainly seems like we have evidence of a cover-up. Now, you know, I'm aggrieved by that, but I'm not surprised that godless communist countries do bad things. What has been extremely concerning and surprising, I think, to a lot of Americans is to see how certain aspects of our government has, in a way, misled them through the last few years. And you've mentioned that you have pretty high confidence that this did not have natural origins. Now we have the Department of Energy and the FBI now say that the lab leak is the most likely scenario as well, which, you know, you mentioned all the apparatuses at our intelligence, world-class, world-leading tools that our intelligence community has, and it boggles the mind of the American people to see that 3 years later, the intelligence community is finally coming around to where the American people were, you know, about 3 years ago. Could you speak to, can you elaborate on how you developed your degree of confidence to the extent that you can? I realize there's information you cannot share. But.
Well, I've talked a little bit about it today, but I think, you know, this highlights one of the, you know, the comments that the Congresswoman from Michigan was making earlier about no one can know with certainty. I actually agree with that at this point in time, but we don't have to in making intelligence community assessments. We have to have some level of confidence. It can be low, it can be moderate, or it can be high. So I have been very clear that when we look at all of our intelligence, much of it is circumstantial. And with circumstantial evidence, you can never know with certainty. But that doesn't mean that you cannot make an assessment with some level of confidence. And the more I have learned about this and the more I have seen, and again, as the person who had more access to our intelligence for the first year, as much as anyone in our government, my level of confidence became higher. The things that others were supporting for a natural origins approach have fallen away, and some of the people that were promoting that have been revealed to have had conflicts of interest in perhaps promoting that as a theory. But again, I go back to the fact that at this point in time, 3.5 years later, no scientist in the world can point to anything from an environmental standpoint that ties COVID-19 to nature. On the other side of the equation, you have all of the things that we've talked about, China's obfuscation, and the fact that they have the best access to the intelligence that would be diagnostic and dispositive, and yet they have shared none of that with us. And if they had any that was indicative or diagnostic that this was naturally occurring, why wouldn't they share that? If there was no one to blame for this pandemic, why wouldn't they share that information? I think the answer is that they know certainly, or they either they don't know the answer or they don't want to know the answer, because like me, they know that the intelligence certainly points to lab leak as the most plausible assessment, the only one supported by intelligence, science, and common sense at this point.
Now, you developed this high degree of confidence. Could you speak about when? Was it earlier or later in the process?
You know, when I became the Director of National Intelligence, I had seen the prior assessments. I had been a member of Congress on the intelligence community. I said, show me all of the intelligence that we have. And I was frankly surprised how little we had supporting natural origins, how much we had, circumstantial or otherwise, that supported the lab leak. And over time, again, some of the explanations for natural origins became less and less likely. Again, I was told that some of this would appear over a course of months. We've now been 3.5 years, and we haven't identified an intermediate host, a reservoir source or species, any of those things. So pretty rapidly, which is why I talked about the process that Mike Pompeo, Secretary Pompeo, and I went through to declassify some of this with the hope that the next administration would declassify more information while protecting our sources and methods. and that this body would hold hearings. Unfortunately, 2 years went by without any hearings in this body into the origins of COVID. So, I'm grateful that we're getting there, but these are things that should have taken place a long time ago.
Now, you've alluded that even as the DNI, you had trouble sometimes getting information from the intelligence community, and could you speak to that?
Well, I think there was at times reluctance, and as I've commented, that the independent analytic ombudsman found that there were instances where, particular to China, some intelligence was being suppressed so that it could not be used to support policies that the administration in which I was serving, the Trump administration, could use that, and that was improper, I think I've addressed that.
Yeah, that's, I mean, to me, that's one of our major concerns from an oversight perspective is looking into, an intelligence agency that seems to gone wayward in some of these aspects. And Dr. Lowenthal, while I certainly appreciate some of your comments, I think the intelligence community may have drifted since then, and so it's important that we look into this. I'm sorry, my time's up. Thank you, Chair.
I now recognize Dr. McCormick from Georgia for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ratcliffe,